Whether you're watching on thisislitTube.com, our new website, or you're watching on YouTube, this is Lit Sports Online, part of the LitTube network. Pat on set again to talk about some mixed martial arts and also a big-time boxing fight that we will get into as well. But first, we're going to talk about UFC Fight Night on Fox Sports 1 from the previous week, where we had one of the headliners was Francis Ngannou and Curtis Blaydes, a heavyweight bout with Francis Ngannou getting a quick knockout. Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, so I was really interested to see what was going to happen in this fight because Francis Ngannou's coming off 2 losses. He's one of those guys who came up really quickly. There was a lot of hype around him. He got a bunch of quick knockouts and earned a title shot and got pretty handily beaten by Stipe Miocic. And after that, we saw him come back against Derek Lewis in the worst fight of all time with just 2 guys who didn't throw anything. And Francis Ngannou was just gun-shy the whole time and even said after the fight that his confidence was just shot. And so I was really interested to see how he was going to come back against Curtis Blaydes, who is kind of a similar style matchup as Stipe, except I think he has a little... Stipe definitely has better striking than Blaydes and maybe a little more power, but I was interested to see how Francis Ngannou was going to come back because his confidence was what was bothering him and his mindset. So I thought it was interesting for them to put this particular fight together because it was a rematch. And I know it's a rematch that Curtis Blaydes wanted because he lost to Ngannou, or I think it was both of their first fights in the UFC, and they lost because Curtis Blaydes' eyes swelled up. I think last week I said it was a cut. I'm mistaken. It was a swollen eye, and it just swelled shut. So it was a doctor stoppage. You couldn't see out of the eye. They're not going to let him go if he's, blind on one side. And so he was asking for the rematch. So I thought he was going to have the edge, considering it's pretty, like I said, stylistically similar to the Stipe fight. But I also thought it was interesting because if you're going to build Francis Ngannou's confidence back up, what better way than to put him in there with somebody he already knows he can beat?
Right. Well, this also begs the question of, is this what Francis Ngannou is as a professional mixed martial arts fighter? Because we've seen a few fights where he gets the quick knockout, but we've also seen fights where he loses. So it seems like the fights he does win, a lot of times it is something that happens relatively quickly in the fight where he just gets that round 1 knockout. It's interesting to see what his career trajectory is going to be from here, because, he's still a relatively young fighter, right? He's got a lot of fights left in him.
Yeah, he's pretty new to the sport. He started training kind of late in life, and he's just one of those guys who's just a phenomenal, specimen. He's a giant man. He's super fast. He moves way quicker than most heavyweights, so he just has the abilities that are necessary to get a late start in the game, whereas somebody like Curtis Blaydes is, high school and college wrestler, a guy who's been doing something in this athletic endeavor for a long, long time. And so I think that some of the questions I had about Ngannou were answered. His mindset, his confidence, we didn't see him as gun-shy this time. He got the quick knockout. He wasn't, timid the whole fight. Not that the whole fight was enough time for him to really be that timid, but the questions that weren't answered for me are: is his takedown game, is his takedown defense better? Is his ground game better at avoiding damage? Does he have an easier time standing up against a high-level wrestler like a Curtis Blaydes or a Stipe? We didn't see those questions answered. So, is he going to go towards the top of the division and towards the title shot again, where he's going to have to fight a Stipe Miocic or a Daniel Cormier, God forbid, and just get in the same position where he can't handle the grappling? We don't know, because we didn't have a chance to see that, which is kind of the bad side of him, getting those quick finishes.
How would you compare Ngannou to someone like a Derek Lewis? Because, are they kind of like the same idea? Like they're just one of those guys that is a threat to knock you out at any given point in the match, but at the same time, they're not really like the best quality fighter. How do you make that distinction there?
I can see the comparison for sure. They're both guys who are known for that one-punch knockout power. They're not known for grinding out a decision or taking a guy down and wrestling them to death. But Derek Lewis, I think, is a little more well-rounded. I think Ngannou's a better striker, probably. He's probably quicker. They both have crazy power. I would not want either of them to touch me, let alone punch me. And so I think they're very similar in that sense, but I think Derek Lewis is probably a little more well-rounded. But I think he's far less explosive. He's far less athletic than Francis Ngannou. So you're whereas they both like to fight in a similar range, Ngannou's going to be able to close that distance and just make you pay for a small mistake a little faster than Derek Lewis is.
Probably, especially given the age gap at this point. But yeah, I see what you're saying. So our next fight on this card that's really worth talking about is Alistair Overeem versus Sergei Pavlovic. And this was a heavyweight bout with Overeem winning. Can you break this one down for us?
Yeah, it was good to see Overeem get a win again. He's kind of looked rough as of late. We saw him lose to Francis Ngannou in one of the most terrifying fashions I've ever seen. But he looked good in this fight, and it says a lot about Pavlovic that they gave him Overeem as his first fight in the UFC. Overeem is a tall order for anyone at the top of the division, let alone a guy who it's his first fight in the UFC. Yeah, the guy's coming in. He's got, I think he's 12-0 with 9 knockouts, kind of undefeated. Looks great, but to put him in there against somebody like Alistair Overeem, who is a champion in almost every organization he's been in. He's a kickboxing world champion. He's the most decorated striker to ever be in the heavyweight division, bar none. And so putting Pavlovic in there with him it says a lot about their expectations, but it also is kind of cruel in a sense. You know, you're handing him to one of the top dogs, and on any given night, if Alistair Overeem has a good night, he could beat anyone in the division, without a doubt. He has beaten a lot of the guys at the top. So it was an interesting fight going into it, and then what we saw when we got into the fight is just a very well-rounded, very experienced fighter against a younger guy that had a lot of hype behind him. And Overeem kind of was able to have a little bit of success striking, but once they got into the clinch, he threw a couple knees, he tripped him, had some good ground control, and then just landed 8 or 9 completely unanswered shots on the ground, and the ref stopped the fight, and it was pretty one-sided.
Okay, so a bit of a learning experience for the new guy, and I guess we're going to have to see if he can rebound.
Yeah.
Were there any other fights on this card you wanted to discuss?
Not that I can think of. I didn't even watch them all, honestly. The fight's at 6:30 in the morning in Beijing, China. I'm not gonna wake up at 2 and start watching the undercard.
Well, those are the important heavyweight fights on that one to talk about anyway.
Yeah.
So we also want to move on to the Ultimate Fighter card coming up here on UFC. It's actually this upcoming weekend, Friday, right?
Friday night.
So the top main event is Dos Anjos versus Usman. What can you tell us about this one? It's a welterweight bout.
Yeah, it's a real interesting fight. In two guys at the top of the division. Dos Anjos recently coming off of a loss in his interim title fight against Colby Covington. And he's fighting Kamaru Usman, who's a guy who thinks he deserves the next title shot. I mean, he's definitely up there. He's definitely in the conversation. I mean, it's number 5 versus number 3. I think stylistically, this is kind of a bad fight for Dos Anjos. He's the former lightweight champion, came up to welterweight, ran through a bunch of guys, and earned himself a title shot. I mean, he's a phenomenal fighter, but I think that in this fight, we're going to see a larger welterweight with better wrestling take on Dos Anjos, who I think is just going to be a little outmatched. I think it's going to be somewhat similar style-wise to the Colby Covington fight, where Usman's a guy who likes to have a lot of forward pressure, likes to use his wrestling, mix it up, takedown game to kind of control the fight, control the pace, and smother guys. And I think we're going to see a similar thing that happened in the Colby Covington fight with Dos Anjos, because he likes to kind of fight in a similar way, except he doesn't use quite as much wrestling. He's probably a better, more varied striker than Usman. But I think at this weight class, Dos Anjos doesn't quite have the power that he did at lightweight. And I think that Usman's game is going to be enough to keep Dos Anjos out of putting him on the fence and pressuring him like he likes to.
So you see the higher-ranked fighter here as the underdog because of the particular matchup.
Yeah, and I think Vegas has him as the underdog as well.
Interesting.
So if you're going to bet, he's not a bad way to try to make a little bit of money. I just don't know if it's the smartest bet. But, like I said, Dos Anjos is a phenomenal fighter. We've seen him dismantle some of the best people in any division that he's been in. I mean, we saw him take apart Robbie Lawler, who's one of the... I mean, his nickname is Ruthless. He's one of the most feared fighters in the UFC. He's known for just high-pressure, high-pace bloodbaths. And Dos Anjos just picked him apart the whole time. So he has the capacity to win at welterweight and win very, very impressively. I just think Usman is one of the guys in the division that's a bad matchup for him.
Okay, so we also have on the same card a bantamweight bout of Pedro Munoz versus Brian Caraway. I mean, what's there to say about this one, really?
So this is kind of a crossroads for both guys. They're both guys that have beaten most of the guys in the division, but then they get towards the top and they lose. Munoz has lost to Sunsao, Jimmy Rivera, a couple other people. Brian Caraway lost to a Sunsao, but then he's beat, Aljamain Sterling and a couple other guys towards the top. So it's going to be real interesting to see. I'm particularly interested to see how Brian Caraway does. He's coming off a loss, but it was his first fight after almost a 2-year layoff, and they're both guys that are, like I said, are kind of towards the top of the division and both on the cusp of being in the top, top of the top 10. And if they pull off a win here, especially in impressive fashion, I could see both of them being, or either one of them being, 1, maybe 2 fights away from a title shot, which both of them have been vying for a long time. So it'll be real interesting to see. I'm not sure who to pick in this fight, but I do want to see how they both look. So it should be fun.
Okay. Anything else on this card that's worth talking about?
I do just want to mention one of my favorite lighterweight fighters is fighting, Joseph Benavidez. Always look forward to him fighting. He actually holds a win over the current flyweight champion, Henry Cejudo. He worked his way up and fought Demetrius Johnson twice. He's a phenomenal fighter, and it's always fun to watch him fight, especially lower on the card. It's a nice way to try to get people to watch the undercard. I think that's what their aim is. So.
And our last mixed martial arts UFC thing to talk about is the other UFC Fight Night that's coming up on Saturday. And headlining that event, we have a heavyweight bout of Junior Dos Santos against Tai Tuivasa. Am I saying that right?
Tai Tuivasa. Yeah, it's I think he's Australian or from New Zealand, one of the two. This big Samoan guy.
Okay. Kind of makes sense.
Yeah. This should be a fun fight. It's 2 strikers, 2 guys that like to throw down. Not, kickboxers are going to throw a lot of big kicks or weird strikes from range. It's just 2 guys that want to get in there and remove your head with their fist. So I don't know what's going to happen. Dos Santos is former heavyweight champion, defended his belt a couple times. He has wins over some of the biggest names in the division, but he's a little long in the tooth at this point. I think after we saw Dos Santos lose to Cain Velasquez twice, he never quite looked the same. Those fights were absolutely brutal, and I think they just took a lot out of him. That being said, he's looked good recently. As of late, he's looked better than he has. He's kind of been trading wins and losses, but he always has the capacity to knock you out with one punch. And so does Tai Tuivasa. Tai Tuivasa is a younger guy. He hasn't been in the UFC all that long. I think he's in his early 20s. I think he's 23 or something crazy. And I think, like I said, it's going to be a fun matchup. It's just a question of who has better boxing, control of the range, and foot movement, really. And for me, my guess is Dos Santos. I think it's a little too much too soon for Tuivasa, but it's not that surprising that he's in this position because the heavyweight division's pretty shallow. There's not a ton of super awesome talent to make it a really, your number 10 guy is Mark Hunt, who's won 1 out of his last 5 fights. So, that being said, a lot of that is the name value and the fact that Mark Hunt is strong enough to knock out a Rhino. So it's not surprising that he's still in the top 10. But when your top 10 still has guys that are won out of the last 5 fights, doesn't say a lot for the health of the division overall.
So the interesting that they book again a seasoned veteran against a relative newcomer.
Yeah, it seems to be a trend for this weekend, I guess.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Now, we also have another heavyweight bout, and this one kind of makes me laugh because we have Justin Pretty Boy, or not Pretty Boy, what's his thing? Big Pretty Willis. Justin Big Pretty Willis against Mark Hunt, who you were just talking about.
Yeah.
So, this is going to be an interesting one. What do you see happening here?
It's kind of similar to the main event. It's 2 guys that like to strike. Justin Willis has some wrestling, has some powerful takedowns. He tends not to use them as much. He's a guy who likes to come forward and throw punches. He likes to kind of be the bully in the fight. He likes to be the one who's walking you down, who's throwing punches. He has a good straight backhand, a straight cross. He's a southpaw, so he has that strong straight left. He has a big overhand right. Unfortunately for him, he's fighting one of the best counter strikers in the UFC. Mark Hunt, that's his game. Mark Hunt that's what he wants to do. He wants to kind of walk towards you, let you throw shots, and then pick his moment after you open yourself up. And from what I've seen of Justin Willis, he likes to throw those big shots, and he leans forward a lot, and he leaves himself open. And that is, like, if you were going to build an opponent for Mark Hunt, that's exactly what it would be. Because he's sneaky, he's fast for how big and how old he is, and he hits hard. He's the king of the walk-off knockout. If you look up his highlight reel, and there's like 12 different fights where he lands a punch, and before the guy hits the ground, he just turns around and walks away because he knows it's done. It's one of the coolest things you could ever do in fighting. It's just the walk-off knockout. Like, you don't even need the ref. You're just like, nah. And so I think that Justin Willis is probably going to play right into his hand. That being said, we have seen Mark Hunt have some trouble with some of the guys who are a little bigger than him, longer reach, who were able to kind of pick him apart with footwork and kind of better strike placement. I don't see that typically from Justin Willis. He's, like I said, more of a coming forward, big shots, pressure kind of guy, but we'll see. He's quick, he's athletic, and he could give Mark Hunt some interesting looks, but I kind of hope Mark Hunt pulls this one out because this is the last one on his contract, so he's done in the UFC most likely at this point, especially considering he's in the middle of a lawsuit with them over the Brock Lesnar fight. But he might retire, so I would like to see him win the fight in impressive fashion, retire, and walk into the sunset.
Yeah, that would be a good ending for him. And then, I mean, is he gonna? So you figure he's retiring after that?
He might,
or go to another MMA organization.
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. He might do that. He might go back to kickboxing. Who knows? He's also talked in recent years about how he's noticing the effects of being a fighter. His speech slurs a little more easily from time to time. He has a little bit of memory lapses. He is well aware of the damage that he's doing to himself. So I think he's probably winding down his career, if not at the end of it at this point.
Okay. Next, we have a light heavyweight bout on this card of Mauricio Rua against Tyson Pedro. Yeah. And they seem pretty evenly matched on paper at rank 13 and rank 14, but how do you see it?
So we got another young guy against a seasoned vet. It's kind of funny looking at the page. It's just the right column is all the young guys, and the left column is all the seasoned vets. And we got Shogun, a legend of the sport. I mean, former light heavyweight champion, beat Lyoto Machida to win the title, then was the unfortunate start of John Jones' title reign. Unfortunately for him, it was not a good fight for him. But he's another guy who's again, towards the end of his career, his fighting, he's taken a lot of shots, he's taken a lot of knockouts, he's handed out a lot of knockouts for sure. But at this point, to me, he just looks, he's not as quick as he used to be. His style he's kind of changed his style up to kind of accommodate for the change in his, approach to the game and what he is capable of doing. He can't just be that kind of move forward, controlled chaos shootbox style that we see, because he comes from the shootbox academy, which is the same place that Anderson Silva, Vanderlei Silva, Christian Cyborg Santos comes from, and these people are like, they're known for just wars in the gym. They just used to beat the absolute hell out of each other, and they just are the people who would, like, the whole style was built around go in there, bite down on your mouthpiece, and just throw down, and it takes its toll. And he doesn't fight like that anymore either. So that's how he got big. That's how he became the champion. He just kind of saw that Lyoto Machida was not covering up a lot. Machida was backing straight up, and Shogun just said, I'm going to bite down my mouthpiece, I'm going to walk through the punches, and I'm going to land one on your head, and that's what happened, and he became the champion. But at this point, he's not the same fighter. Fights a little smarter, but I don't think he's going to pull this one out. We'll see. Tyson Pedro is a young guy. He's a lot bigger, too. And he trains with Tai Tuivasa, which is interesting. And he's a guy who likes to strike. He has the length on him. He likes to kick. We'll see.
Faster, quicker as well.
Yeah, he's a lot younger. And I think it's gonna be one of those times where they get in the octagon and you go, really? That's the same weight class? What? Because, like, he's never been a guy who's, like, jacked or anything. He's not, super muscled up. He's just kind of a bigger dude. But Tuivasa is a young, huge, athletic guy. And I think he's going to be a little too quick for Shogun to handle. The reach is going to be a little too long. But
Pedro, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Tyson Pedro.
Tyson Pedro. And, I think he's going to be a little too much for Shogun. But you never know. Shogun, like they say, the last thing in your game to go with age is the power. And Shogun still has the propensity to land that one punch, especially that big overhand. If he can slip one of Pedro's long shots and land that big overhand right on Pedro's head, he's done. We'll see.
And I told you at the beginning of the episode we were going to be talking boxing, and indeed we are, because on Showtime we got a pay-per-view that's going to be Wilder versus Fury. This is on Saturday, December 1st. Again, it's a pay-per-view fight, big-time title fight, world title, world heavyweight.
Yes. The biggest, what used to be the biggest sports event in the world. You're watching Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and Joe Frazier and all these giants of sports.
Yeah, it seems like all the big names retired. Even Mayweather's gone, but yeah.
Boxing's not quite what it used to be. It's still generally bigger than MMA. Like, for the biggest pay-per-views in boxing, generally way outdo the biggest pay-per-views in MMA. But this one I think probably will, and it's the fact that this is a lot of, like, two nations' favorite heavyweight son. You got Deontay Wilder, the American heavyweight champion. I think he's like 40-0 with like 36 knockouts. Dude just hits hard. Almost no one is able to actually sit there and take any of his punches. Versus the Gypsy King, Tyson Fury, who is not a power puncher, but he is a phenomenal boxer. He outboxed Vladimir Klitschko. That alone should say a ton, considering Vladimir Klitschko is the greatest heavyweight champion in modern history. Past couple decades. And so this is, again, it's almost one of those kind of battle of styles. Is it going to be Tyson Fury and his quickness and his weird footwork and his, like, awkward head movement and his awkward punches that come from weird angles that you don't expect? He's one of those guys who's a big opportunist. He waits for you to throw something, and then he has weird little shuffle steps where he gets out of the way real quick and throws a little tiny punch and just catches you off guard. Or is Deontay Wilder able to land one of those giant astronomical punches. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't see a full title fight where Tyson Fury doesn't at least take a couple of big shots.
Well, I think you know, when it comes to boxing, it's one of those things where the safer bet is usually just on the better technical boxer, the better defensive boxer. Because it's not the same as mixed martial arts where, like, all the fights, well, not all the fights, but, like, a lot of the fights will end in that knockout punch. Boxing a lot of times does go the distance, and, you know, it could be one of those times, you know. But, again, that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, but, I mean, if that were true more times than not, then Mike Tyson wouldn't have had the title run he had. You know, Mike Tyson was never the best technical boxer. He's a guy who walked in there, he put his head in your chest, and then he threw the biggest punch he could from that tiny little balled up, muscly body that he had, and just hit hard as hell, you know. And I don't know what's going to happen in this fight, but like I said, I think it does come down to, is Tyson Fury's... He confuses people. He doesn't let people get into the rhythm that they normally would. So, like, you see, typically in fights, in MMA and in boxing, you see each guy, like, once they'll kind of settle in to like I said, the rhythm of the fight. Once they kind of see how the other guy's going to go, they kind of, they whatever you want to say, they download it, they comprehend what the other guy's doing, and they make their adjustments, and they kind of get themselves into that state of, like, okay, this is what I know, this is what I have to do. I'm going to look for these openings. I'm going to try to pick my shots here and here and here. I notice he's doing this. I'm going to try to counter with this. Tyson Fury is so awkward and has so many weird things that he does that heavyweights typically don't do, that a lot of times guys just can't get comfortable in there.
Yeah, I mean, but for me, I think back to fights like, you know, first of all, you had Pacquiao against Mayweather. Pacquiao was a great power boxer, and we saw how that went down. Like, he basically couldn't land much of anything on Mayweather, and that was just a snooze fest. But again, the good defensive technical boxer one. I think way back in the day, you had that rivalry between Sugar Ray Robinson and Jake LaMotta. Jake LaMotta was a great power boxer, and he only won like one of their matchups when they fought each other like 5 times. So, yeah. I mean, but again, I'll be honest, I don't really know these guys that are fighting as well as you do. I'm just saying generally in boxing, I'd put my money on the more defensive, like, good technical boxer. The guy that avoids those big shots rather than the guy betting on the guy to land the big shot.
That's true, and he's the underdog right now, so it's not a bad bet to take. If it comes to Saturday and he's still the betting underdog, I might just throw $20 on him just because. But like I said, I honestly have no idea who's going to win. I think it's a phenomenal fight, and I can't wait to see what happens, because whoever wins this fight is then going to fight Anthony Joshua, the heavyweight champion of England right now. And either way it goes, that's a hell of a fight. I would love to see, again, then it'll be an American champion versus an English champion. Huge fight. Just worldwide huge fight. Or you get the 2 best boxers, the 2 best modern heavyweights in England's history, fighting each other to unify the titles. So, either way, champion versus champion next. Don't know who's going to win. Don't know who I would rather see fight Anthony Joshua. I would like to see them both fight Anthony Joshua. I'd like to just watch all 3 of them. Just round and round they go and just see who wins after a while. But it's going to be a very entertaining fight. Or it could be boring if Tyson Fury gets his way. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. I'm kind of curious how well this pay-per-view is going to sell, because, you know, I'm just wondering, like, could it top the Mayweather-McGregor or the Mayweather-Pacquiao, or how's this going to shape up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Mayweather is just a crazy big sell. I mean, he's the biggest A-side there's ever been. There's no way. I think it'll definitely outdo all the UFC for the weekend, but I don't think it'll top Mayweather.
So that's going to do it for this episode, guys. I mean, we covered mixed martial arts for this upcoming weekend, and of course the Wilder versus Fury big-time pay-per-view boxing fight world championship on Showtime December 1st, so you might want to tune into that as well. And guys, again, you know, this is LitTube.com. It's our new website. We're posting our videos there as well as the YouTube channel. But if you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and give us a like. And that's all I got to say. You got anything, Pat?
It's a hell of a time to be a fight fan. There's a lot of great cards coming up before the end of the year. We got 2 title fights on the next pay-per-view coming out. We'll do a preview for that next week. We got the return of John Jones towards the end of the year. Like I said, it's a hell of a time to be a fight fan. Stay tuned. We'll have plenty more for you.
As long as we cuddle afterwards.